Do you remember these? Me talking about them. Monday Montage episode 14, I believe. I picked up a bunch of these Mortal Realms magazines from the Fantasy Forest Festival from a company called Pit Gaming. I'll put a link to them down in the description. But I had an idea. The sprues are in here. Yep, here they are. So, typical kind of Games Workshop type painting on the front, which is fab. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's lovely. But I want to play around with something different. And that is, I want to make them look like they're made out of marble. Here we go, let's do this. Okay, so where I want the marble to be broken away, I'm just going to pack in some aluminium foil with some hot melt glue just to hold it in place, and then I'm going to coat the aluminium with a little hot melt glue and sprinkle over some vermiculite on that just to give a nice grainy texture to the broken exposed parts of the marble that's not polished. There you go. Okay, I am not going to lie, there's been quite a bit of trial and error at this point. This technique was dead simple when I was a kid. I can remember doing it all of the time. However, one thing to consider with your oil paints is you need to thin them. You need to thin them with a little bit of white spirit, but you need that consistency to remain relatively thick. So you're only going to need, for what we got there, like an inch. So we got there about an inch bead of paint, and you can see I've just put a few mil of white spirits in the bottom of the beaker there. So you are not going to need a lot. You're after a consistency of paint, something like single cream. It needs just a bit of flow on it. That's what you're after. You don't want it to be running around, just really runny, but you really want just a little flow on it. Okay, so you can see I have a selection of colours here. I've gone somewhat kind of colour theory, complementary colours, so sort of a darker green and a lighter green and a red and a brown, with some white as well. So, but you could kind of go with any colour choices really. And then I'm going to carefully just pour a few drops of the oil onto the surface of the water. And using the back end of a brush, I'm going to just start bringing these together. Until we've got them nicely intertwined. Okay, that's looking like an interesting array of pattern. I'm going to take my pieces. You'll notice they've got a slightly pale bluish green cast to them. That's because I put a bit of a wash on them first. Okay, I might need to swoop it through a little more. So make sure you get it right down into the paint. Now it's going to look a little bright and garish to start off with. That's fine because we're going to knock it all back. So I'll do the other one and the couple of random bits and put them aside to dry. Okay, so depending on how much detail you've got, you are probably going to want to pat it down a little. This will take off excess paint, but more importantly, in readiness for the next step, it is taking off the residual water. But like you can see here, there's quite a thick dollop of the paint there. Just press into it, try not to wipe, and it'll lift off the excess, but not not really sort of destroy the patterning. Okay, as you can see here, this is just using the remaining colours that I'd already got. I've just made this very pale sort of pea green colour, which is very thin. So it's been thinned down with turpentine and white spirit, so that it will flow through the airbrush easily. Now I know some of you are going to say, I'm not so sure about putting my oils through the airbrush. You could do this step with acrylics, but you just need to let the oil paint that's on your minis dry before you could add the acrylic washes that we're going to do now. You can't do this with a brush at this stage because you'd smear the paint that's already on there. So keep that in mind. So when you thin oils, they get quite transparent. That's better. That's pushing that right back. So we have a very, very pushed back version of what we did have before. I'm just doing a small amount of airbrushing here, guys, with the oil paints. It is advisable to have your respirator on when you're airbrushing with oils. So just keep that in mind as well. Yeah, don't forget that with oils. Now, just to say, cleaning your airbrush, if you've used oils through it, you need to run your white spirit or turpentine or whatever substitute you use through there a couple of times first till that's running clear, and then whatever proprietary airbrush cleaner that you use for cleaning your airbrush. Okay, these look good. They now need to dry before I do anything else to them. Okay guys, one of your best tools for doing the next step is a feather. So go take a walk in the park, you'll probably find one. If not, go to the craft shop, and if you can't be bothered with a feather, just grab yourself a brush and work with that. The only thing I'm going to do with this feather, it's got a bit of a round top, and I just want that to be a little more pointy. So I'm just going to snip off a little of the That's it. So I've got more of a point. There we go. So more like that. Okay, so just along with the feather that you're going to work with, you're also going to want a small detailing brush, a little pad of tissue paper, and a brush with some, you know, busted bristles on the end, just for feathering, feathering. You know. Anyway, so that's what we need for creating the veining in the marbling, plus of course a colour. So I've got this colour here. So I have mixed up this acrylic, which is basically a yellow ochre and a Payne's grey, to get a sort of a dirty greenish colour. This is just a little on the dark side, so I'm adding some white just to bring it down a little touch, so it's not quite as dark, and I'm adding some water, and you are after a consistency which is like double cream, so that you get a good amount of pigment but a good flow as well. Dip your feather in a little bit of water first, and then just get it into that paint and really sort of load it up with the paint. Now I'm going to do this just here so you can see first like the initial mark that we want to make. You want to roll the feather like this to create this sort of veining, and then I'm going to use the tissue pad. You want to work into those edges to soften them. Now I'm working on a little bit of card here, so the paint is staining the card pretty much straight away, whereas on the surface of plastic it won't do that so readily. So I used a heavier hand there so you could see what it was I was doing, but get that loaded with paint again. So with acrylics you're going to want to work relatively fast, so I'm just going to bring the feather down using the tip. Twisting is important, bringing it down, put a second stroke in there maybe, that's it. Okay, drop that over there. Now what I want to do is the scrubby brush. I want to go in and just start breaking the edges. So I'm just tapping the brush against the edges of that mark. It's really difficult because I'm looking at it from the other side of the figure instead of looking at it straight on, so that you guys can see in the filming. Okay, and before it dries out completely, go in with the little tissue pad and just wipe here and there to soften out a little further, and the tissue will lift out little bits of paint as well. It's quite fiddly, I'm not going to lie, but you'll get this nice veining running through your piece. Now the little detailing brush will allow you to just slightly control a little bit more, so you can start to play with the with what you've already got there. Don't forget, don't do too much. You need to go back in and soften out those lines before they get set. Now the reason I would say play with the feather more than the brush is because the feather is going to give you more or less contrived lines, because it's harder to control the feather. So Whereas with the brush, our brains work in patterns, or like to work in patterns, and so the lines we make with the brush are just a touch more contrived than what the feather will give us. With that bit of a twist to the feather, we lose control of the tip. Yeah, that's looking really nice, that is. Hopefully you can see I really can't see the screen on the camera properly, so hopefully you can see all the little subtleties that's going on there.